Hi Vijay, how are you?
Fine, ma'am. How are you, ma'am?
I'm fine. Hi Neha, Mamta.
Hi, ma'am.
How
Hi,
are you?
ma'am.
Fine. What
Fine.
about you, ma'am?
Fine only. Okay, so we'll start with the class, okay? Let others also join. So the previous parts, any doubts on that part? Is it clear? Like cases and everything, is that part clear? Is that part clear? Previous classes? See, if anything is not clear, anything to be repeated or something, you can tell me. Anyone? What do I understand now? Is it clear or not? You can tell,
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
Clear, right? Okay. So if
Ma'am.
anything is there, you can let me know. Okay. Any cases, anything is there, you can tell. Okay, so in last class we discussed about the basic elements part, right? That what all elements we need, and in detail we discussed about the last two parts, that free consent should be there, and also we need lawful consideration, and also the object of that particular contract also should be lawful. So these were the five basic elements that we discussed. So today we will be discussing three cases basically with regard to the elements part, and also there are few cases regarding the other things we will study, right? That with regard to free consent and all, also there are some cases that we will continue in next classes, because in one class like discussing 3-4 cases, that much is only enough. So next class we will discuss some cases relating to free consent, but today we will discuss some regarding consideration and minority and all of that, so regarding like the second and third points. So basic elements as we have studied, it is what? Offer and acceptance should be there. Intention to create legal relationship should be there. How will we know about intention of a person, whether this person is intending to enter into legal relationship or not? It will be evident from the offer that the person is making, or from the kind of consideration that we are getting. From that also it might be evident that this person is having an intention to enter into legal relationship, like what we studied in case of that Khalid versus Carbolic case, right? What happened in that case? The company that was producing that smoke ball, they themselves said that we will be giving you a reward of £100, and to give that we have already deposited £1,000 in this Alliance Bank. Now it is very clear from his offer, right, from the offer of that company, that they intend to create a legal relationship. Why? Because in their offer only they have mentioned that they are bound under that particular conditions. If someone is suffering from influenza, cold, or any other similar diseases, they will be paying or they will be giving that prize money. So in such cases, what happens? From the offer itself, it becomes very much clear that the person is having intention to enter into legal relationship, right? But there might be some cases where it's also clear that there is no intention to enter into legal relationship, like the case of Belfour versus Belfour. We saw that it's just a promise between husband and wife. Now, there between husband and wife, there might be multiple promises, but it's not necessary that every time they were having the intention to enter into legal relationship. So it's what happens is that in the offer or the kind of consideration that we are getting, in with that only it becomes very much clear or evident whether the parties were having this intention to create legal relationship, or they were just making some random promises to some like friends or family members or something like that. So we need intention to create legal relationship as well. Next, we also need competency of parties. So the parties also should be competent enough to give their consideration. A minor may not be able to understand the consequences of giving his consideration, right? Giving his acceptance. If an offer is made to a minor, he might not be able to understand, or like read that entire contract and then understand what will be the consequences of it. So they are not competent. A person of unsound mind may not be competent, or someone might not be competent under some kind of law, rules, regulations, etc. So we also need competency of parties to make it a valid contract. Then we also need free consent of the parties. So there are certain grounds based on which we can say that if consent was obtained by any of these grounds, it was not free consent. So in that case, we cannot consider that. Otherwise, if consent was free, it will lead to a valid contract. Then we also have lawful consideration and lawful object. whatever is the purpose of making that particular contract, that purpose should be lawful. It should not be something that is going against the law. I cannot make a contract with someone to cause loss to another person, to cause harm to another person, and then make a payment against that particular thing. Similarly, consideration also should be lawful. Someone cannot just make a contract to kill a person or something like that. So we need what? We need intention to create legal relationship. For that, you can refer to this case also. That without intention, the parties will not be bound to continue with their promise. Now, definition. So also with regard to this, right, intention to create legal relationship, it is also implied from consideration that both the parties are getting something, some benefits out of that contract, and because of which they are performing their part of contract. Now this benefit is what we call as consideration, and it should be something that the court would also recognize, right? It should not be just making a promise to go out for a movie with a friend. Why? Because there might be consideration that you are getting someone to go along, but court would not recognize that. Why? Because it is not something that will have some weightage in eyes of law. So consideration should also be something that court would recognize, and accordingly court would ask you to perform your part or the other party to compensate or things like that. So the definition of consideration is provided under section 2D of the Indian Contract Act. Anyone wants to explain what this definition is all about? This is the definition. Anyone wants to explain consideration definition? Mamta, you want to explain what is consideration, the definition part?
No, ma'am, I have understood that.
Understood that.
Yesterday part, right, ma'am? That is.
Okay. So in case of consideration, what happens? Try to remember the section that when at the desire of promisor, the promisee or any other person, right? Now that this part is important. That consideration may move from the promisee or any other person also. If I am making an offer to you, consideration may come from you also or someone else on your behalf also. If I am asking you, would you, like if you want to buy a bike or something like that, consideration might come from you also, or your parents might also pay for that. So for consideration, what happens? It's not necessary that it should always move from the promisee only. It may be someone else also from whom consideration might move. Take for example, someone is going to buy something, consideration may move from a friend also, from family members, from relatives or something like that. Or maybe you want to take for example, a person is having like an agency. He is the owner of that particular agency and he is having some agents. Now his agents might also perform certain things on behalf of him. So in that case also, what happens? Consideration is moving from all those other persons, but not the principal himself. Like all these consultancy on all services are there, right? In those cases, what happens? There is one like consultancy firm or something, they are providing some kind of services, but they are not doing that task. They are employing some third party persons to get the work done. Take for example, when you apply for a job and you get selected, they will do some kind of background verification. They will do some sort of background verification. What and all they will verify? Maybe they will verify your address, whether your all degree certificates are genuine or not, your school and everything they would verify. Also nowadays what they are verifying is criminal background of that person. So before hiring, they want to ensure that this person is not having like a cases filed against that person, or maybe like this person is not having like a very bad criminal history or something like that. They want to verify that part also. Now what this like, take for example, there are some like background background verification companies are there. Okay, there are lot many companies in entire India. What these companies are doing is that they will say, now take for example, there is one company like like Urban Company. Okay, Urban Company, what they are doing, they will send people to your house to provide some sort of services. Like now in that case, they need to ensure that this person whom they are sending, that person is not having any criminal record, or that person is not having any sort of, like cases pending or something like that. Because in that case, it becomes risky for, like the company to send them to someone's home. So what they will do is that this Urban Company, before hiring a person, they will ask these background verification companies to check background of a person. And these companies, what they will do, they will have certain like third party agencies with the help of whom they would complete this entire process. In this case, what is happening, this background verification company is providing some sort of service, but they are not doing it themselves, right? Someone else, they are taking the information and everything, and then they are providing. So same thing may apply in a lot of different things, right? So consideration may move from the promisee also, or any other person on behalf of the promisee also. It's not necessary that it should come from both the parties only, then only it would be a valid contract, right? So in case of contracts, what happens is that it may move from the promisee or anyone else also on their behalf. So this part you try to remember from the definition, that it's not always necessary it should move from the promisee only, it can move from someone else also on their behalf. Now, what is consideration? It's a vital element that we need, and it is mainly the type of benefit that people are getting. Then nature and all we discussed, that it should not be in the past. Why? Because it should be at the desire of the promiser. If I'm not, like if that is not something which I'm desiring, then that will not be considered. That will not be a consideration. It should have value in the eyes of law. It must be sufficient, not adequate, and it must move from the promisee to promiser, or anyone on their behalf. Now there is this case with regard to consideration. So what we saw from the definition is that it can move from the promisee or someone else also on their behalf, right? So this case is relating to that only, that consideration may move from the promisee or someone else also. What this case is, Chinnaya versus Ramaya, it was of the year 1882. This case is relating to privity of consideration, that in case of consideration, even consideration coming from third parties or strangers would also be considered as valid. So anyone wants to explain what this case is all about, Chinnaya versus Ramaya, regarding consideration? So this case is regarding consideration. Now this is the definition that I have included. So when a promiser gives a promise, the promisee or any other person may provide a valid consideration in return. If both the parties are happy getting a consideration from a third person also, then also it will be valid. Why? Because both the parties are okay with it. Both the parties are not having any sort of objections with regard to that. So in this particular case, there were mainly three parties involved, right? Three persons were involved. First one was Lakshmi Rani. So Lakshmi Rani was one old lady who gifted her property to her daughter. So first person was Lakshmi Rani. Second is Ramaya, the daughter of Lakshmi Rani, to whom property was gifted. So Lakshmi Rani gifted her property to this daughter Ramaya. And there is another person involved who is Chinnaya. Chinnaya is basically this Lakshmi's sister. Now what happened is, Chinnaya was like residing in Lakshmi's property. Okay, Lakshmi was having like a property, plot of land, where Chinnaya was also residing, and she was also enjoying this property. Later on, what happened is that Lakshmi decided, right? This lady, she decided that I will gift my property to my daughter. But if she is gifting her property to her daughter, there is no guarantee that she will maintain that aunt also, right? That she will allow her to stay or something like that. So what happened is that while gifting that particular property, in that gift deed, she made a provision also. She said that I'm gifting this particular property to you, I'm transferring it in your name, but what you should do is that annually you should pay an amount of 653 rupees to my sister Chennaya. So based on that particular promise only, this agreement was like gift deed was signed and everything. So at that moment, daughter also agreed that, okay, fine, I will be paying this annuity of 653 rupees to your sister every single year. And also along with that particular gift deed, there was another agreement that she signed, like the daughter. In that, she agreed that I will be paying 653 rupees annuity to your sister. So like that, this deed was properly registered and everything, property got transferred, or like by way of gift, it got transferred to the daughter. Now, later on, what she did is that after some time, she refused to provide that annuity amount, 653 rupees. Later on, she refused to provide it to the sister. Now, sister wanted to claim for that amount, so she went to the court and filed a case for that recovery of that annuity amount. So what mainly was held, like arguments were basically, so Ramaya said that there is no consideration that is coming from the sister. This contract that we had, this contract was between me and my mother. My mother gifted me this particular property. So, like her sister is a third person, right? She is a stranger to this particular contract. And I'm not getting any consideration for providing her that annuity amount of 653 rupees. So I'm not bound to provide her this annuity amount. And that is why I'm like refusing to provide this amount. So in court, what was held is that even though you are not getting any consideration from your, from that sister, Chinnaya, you got consideration from your mother. So it's not necessary that consideration should always come from this other party only. It can move from some third persons also. If you had agreed to that particular thing, now you should continue with it, right? So at one moment, if there was one single contract where like one person is gifting her property to another, but there was one condition also, right? That I will be giving annuity of 653 rupees to my aunt. So in that case, you cannot accept one part of that agreement and refuse to perform another part. That was like one entire agreement only. And also you made another agreement accepting that you will be providing this annuity amount to the sister. So in that case, you cannot say that I'm not receiving any consideration from her, so I'm not bound to maintain her or provide her this annuity amount. But you will be bound to provide. Why? Because it was part of one single contract only. And because you were receiving that particular property at that time only, you had agreed that you will be maintaining her, you will be providing this amount. So later on also, you cannot just refuse to provide it, you will be bound to provide it. So in this case, it was basically said that consideration may move from someone else also, and it will still be considered as valid consideration, and you will be bound under this particular contract. You should perform your part of contract. Is the case clear and the concept of privity of consideration and contract? So now what is the difference between privity of contract and consideration? Which one is applicable in India and which one is not? Privity of contract and consideration.
Privity of contract is applicable in India.
Privity of contract is applicable in India. So any third person cannot just come and file a case for enforcement of a contract. But if consideration is coming from a third person, that will still be considered as valid consideration. So you can remember this case for consideration and also for privity. Both the things you can remember this particular case.
Ma'am, you will share the slides, right, ma'am?
Yeah, like after completing this part, right? Essential elements, then together I will share this.
Okay, ma'am.
So if anyone is having contracts for mains also, you can like, if you are reading like consideration part, right? Along with that, you can also remember that fine, if a question comes, I can refer to this case or something like that. Accordingly, you can like prepare for this. And if you are only having it for your prelims exams, then you can remember what basically was held, right? You don't need to remember this entire thing. If it's for prelims you are preparing, you can maybe just remember that, okay, fine, it's Chinaya versus Ramaya. It's relating to consideration or privity of consideration. Might be a question would come like Mansi said, right? That what this case was relating to. If like that kind of question comes, you would be able to answer. And also basically what was held, right? That part you can remember. That what is consideration? It is defined under section 2D. It says consideration may move from promisee or anyone else also. So this case is relating to this. Mother gifted a property to daughter. Daughter agreed to give annuity to her sister. Later on, she refused. What court held? One moment you agreed, you are taking the gift, so you cannot disagree to another part of the same contract. It's one contract, one agreement only. So you cannot accept one part where you are getting benefit, and you cannot refuse one part where you are not getting any benefits. So like that, you can just remember the main points for these cases. So basically in this case, it was held that she will have to provide that annuity amount of 653 rupees. Privity of contract and consideration. This also you can just remember the concept that privity of contract is that third parties cannot come and file a case for enforcement of a contract. But in case of privity of consideration, it will be considered as valid even if it is coming from a third party or even a stranger. But there were like some exceptions to it, right? In general cases, privity of contract rule would apply, that some third party cannot just come and file a case. But there are certain exceptions, like in the case of trust. If there is a trust that was established for benefit of a certain community or a group of persons, after establishment of the trust, they are not working for benefit of those, like a group of people. In that case, those people can file a case that this trust was established for our benefit, now it is not functioning accordingly. In that case, court will not say that it's like privity of contract, you are a stranger to that contract, you were not part of the contract. Why? Because they were the main beneficiaries, right? Because of them only, for their benefit only, this contract took place. So in that case, even though those beneficiaries are third parties or strangers to contract, they can file a case for like enforcement of that particular contract. Same applies for marriage, settlement, partition, or any other family arrangements. If there is like partition of some family property, there is one clause that we will be providing money for marriage of this particular sibling. Then in that case, later on, they cannot refuse, even though that sibling was not a part of that family settlement. That sibling was not getting any property in that particular agreement. So later on, what they can do is that later on, she can say that I was a beneficiary of that particular family settlement. So because they agreed at one moment to keep this much amount for my marriage, now they cannot refuse to do it. Now also they should perform their part of contract because it was something that they agreed on. Same thing applies for acknowledgement or estoppel. So initially the person might not be having the liability, but once he acknowledges that, okay, fine, I'm having this liability, or like I would perform this particular task, later on he again cannot say that I was not liable, right? Initially only I was not liable. So later on he cannot say. Why? Because he himself acknowledged that I will be doing it. Take for example, there is one contract between a landlord and a tenant. In that case, they are the primary parties. They are the persons who are bound to perform the contract. Now this tenant is supposed to pay the monthly rent. But in case this tenant's friend starts living with him and he himself says, I will be paying half of the rent, later on he cannot say that I'm not paying. Why? Because he himself acknowledged his liability. He himself said that because I'm also residing here, I will also be contributing in the rent. Later on, he cannot say. Why? Because he himself acknowledged his liability, so he will have to pay, like make the payments accordingly. So consideration is very much needed to make like an agreement or contract, right? In case of agreements, that consideration thing is not there, right? It may be just a normal promise that is made, just a random promise that is made, but it is consideration only which will make it legally binding. So we need consideration for a contract to be valid. Now there may be certain cases where even though consideration is not there, it will still be considered as valid. First is any kind of contract that is made out of natural love and affection. One, like mother promising that I will be gifting all my properties to you, I will transfer all my properties in your name someday. So that will not be binding, but the moment mother signs and properly gives it in a written form, it becomes binding on her. It may be some sort of voluntary service that is being provided. One person is providing voluntary service without expecting any money or anything like that, but the other person himself comes and says that I will be giving you this reward. Later on, he cannot refuse. Why? Because he himself agreed that I will be providing you a reward. Or if I'm doing something which I'm anyways legally bound to do, even then the other person is saying I will be providing you some sort of benefits. In that case also, later on the person cannot like disagree or something like that, because the person himself accepted that I will be providing you this. So even though consideration is not there, still we would consider that as a valid contract. At that point of time, we will not say consideration is not there. That means it's just a random agreement that the parties made, random promise that the parties made. Even then it will be a valid contract. Why? Because the parties themselves agreed to it, even though consideration was not there for them. Same applies for time barred debt. I'm anyways not liable to pay the debt. So if at that moment I'm agreeing, there is no consideration for me. But even then, because I'm myself only going and agreeing to it, I would be bound under that particular promise. So I cannot be like one moment I'm saying that I will be repaying that particular amount, and then next moment I'm saying that no, I'm not going to pay that time barred debt. So once I'm agreeing, I make myself liable again. I will have to clear that part. So next was regarding competency of parties. So parties should be competent to enter into a contract. So under section 10, we have certain conditions that will make the contract valid. And under section 11, we have three major qualifications that we need to have to make the contract valid, right? Or to be entitled to give our consent or make a valid contract with the other person. So first one is that the person should be a major person. Age of majority will be decided under the Indian Majority Act, section 3. It is 18 years of age that would be applicable. Second is person of sound mind. The person should be of sound mind to be able to understand the contractual obligations, to what I am giving my consent, what will be the consequences if I'm not fulfilling those obligations or those things. And lastly, that the person should not be disqualified from contracting by any other law to which he is subject to. So under any other laws, I should not be disqualified from entering such kind of a contract. I should be entitled to enter into such kind of contracts as well. So with regard to minority, right, that the person should be major, minor people are not entitled to contract. With regard to that, we have two cases that we will discuss. So first is Mohri Bibi versus Dharmodas Ghosh. Anyone wants to explain this case, Mohri Bibi case?
Ma'am, I can just try.
Yeah.
I think this case was regarding that a minor who misrepresented himself to be a major and takes some money from the money lender. And later on, when the time comes and when he was unable to pay the money, then in that case, it was found out that initially the contract word itself ab initio. So as he was a minor, so there was no contract in itself.
Yeah. So this is with regard to contract of minor, but it is even after knowledge. That means the parties were having knowledge that this person is a minor. So what happened in this case is that there are basically 4 parties that we should be knowing in this particular case. First is Dharmodas Ghosh, who is the minor, who actually took that money from the money lender. Second is the money lender Brahmodat. So first one is Dharmodas Ghosh, who is the minor. Second is Brahmodat, who is the money lender. And this money lender was having an agent who would perform all this, like work of lending money and then taking back the money and all of that on behalf of Brahmodat. So his name was Kedarnath. So Kedarnath was basically the attorney or the agent of Brahmodat, and he would perform all the tasks on behalf of Dharmodat. And Mohri Bibi, who was wife of Brahmodat, wife of the moneylender. So in this case, what happened is that this minor, he was below the age of 18 years, and what he did is that he was having this immovable property and he was this owner of this property. So he was the sole owner of this property, but because he was a minor, one guardian was appointed, right? Legal custodian was appointed, and this legal custodian was his mother. So this Calcutta High Court appointed his mother as the legal guardian of that immovable property that Brahmodas Ghosh was having. Now what he did is that he approached this agent of Brahmodat, Kedarnath, for a loan. He wanted a loan of 20,000 rupees, and he said that I'm having this immovable property, and like I will keep this property for mortgage, and then I will be taking this 20,000 rupees from you at 12% interest. So accordingly, they made the agreement and everything, and he also took the first installment, 10,500 rupees he took out of this total 20,000 amount. So when this amount was taken and everything, this transaction was done, at that moment, Dharmodas Ghosh's mother came to know about this transaction. So she wrote a letter to this money lender saying that this person with whom you have transacted, this person is a minor. So this contract is not a valid contract. So maybe you should, like consider cancelling out this particular contract because it's not a valid contract. So what Brahmodat said that we can cancel out this particular order, but whatever money we have already paid, right? The first installment that we have already paid, 10,500 rupees, you return that amount to us. But it was not done. So they filed a case in the lower court because the child was also saying that I'm not bound to, like keep the property for mortgage, and he was also not returning the money. So they filed a case in the lower court asking for return of that particular money. They said that either you, like consider this particular contract as valid and perform it, or you return the money that you have taken, like restore the benefit basically that you have already taken. So in lower court, when this case went, they said that this person was a minor. So obviously this contract is void of initio. So we cannot enforce it. We cannot ask the minor to like perform this particular contract. And also because this contract itself is not valid, we cannot also ask the person to return that particular amount of money to you. So when this case was going on and everything, this person died, Brahmodat died, and lower court also refused that you will not be getting the amount back. Why? Because this person was minor, this contract itself is not valid, so we cannot ask him to perform it or to return that particular amount. So they went for appeal for restoration of the benefits, that either you perform the contract or you return the benefits that you have taken. You return that 10,500 rupees that you have taken. So when it went for appeal, at that time also it was said that the main point was that this moneylender's agent, right, he was having the knowledge that Dharmodas Ghosh is a minor. It's not like Dharmodas Ghosh himself like misrepresented him or they were not having knowledge or something like that. This agent was already aware that he is a minor and he is the owner of this immovable property and he is coming to take this particular loan. Even after knowing, this agent only allowed this particular like transaction to happen. So what court said is that you are having this particular knowledge and even then you are like proceeding with this particular contract basically, right? So we, like you are not entitled to ask for restoration of benefits, or you are not entitled to ask for performance of this particular contract also. So while like arguing the case, they like relied on these two sections, section 64 and 65 of Indian Contract Act. Like when the case went for appeal, right, his wife, she argued based on these two sections that there are two provisions under Indian Contract Act that talks about restoration of benefits. If there is a contract which is voidable or which is void, then the parties should return or restore the benefits that they have taken. They cannot simply just take the benefits and then say that this contract is voidable, I don't want to proceed with it, or that this contract is void, I don't want to proceed with it. So based on these two sections, is like Mohri Bibi said that he should restore that particular benefit that he has taken. But they said that these two provisions should be applicable for contracts which are either voidable or void. Like one contract is made between two parties, later on it turns out that this contract has become void. In that case, it will be applicable. Or it will be applicable, take for example, there is a contract between two persons. A has taken benefits and everything, but it was voidable at his option. After taking benefits, he cannot say that I don't want to perform. He will have to restore the benefits. So it will be applicable only in those cases where there is existence of a valid contract. But in this case, because the other party was a minor, you were having knowledge about it and everything, there is no contract in itself. So if there is no contract, how can we ask for restoration of benefits, right? So basically it was said that because it's a contract with minor and also you were having knowledge, there is no valid contract between you both. Because there is no valid contract, we cannot ask for specific performance of it also, or even we cannot ask for restoration of benefits also. So basically at appeal stage also, they did not get like restoration of benefit or anything, they did not get. Because they were having the knowledge, still they proceeded with that particular contract, right? They made the contract with that particular minor. Is this case clear, Mohri Bibi versus Harmodas Ghosh? Okay, so main thing is that in this particular case, there was a contract with minor, but the person was knowing that he is making a contract with a minor, right? With knowledge, he was making the contract. So court said that that contract itself is invalid, and also because you were having knowledge, still you yourself only proceeded with it. You cannot ask for restoration of benefits also. So that was the main thing. What you should remember is that it is relating to contract with minor that was entered even after having knowledge. Because it was even after having knowledge, their arguments were refused and everything, their claims were refused. They were not, like the minor was not asked to restore the benefits that he has taken. Now next case is Khangul versus Lakha Singh, 1928. Anyone wants to explain what this case is? This is also similar only. So in this case, what happened? This is also similar to the other one. What is the main difference? That contract with minor without knowledge. That means without knowing that I'm making a contract with a minor, or because the minor misrepresented himself to be a major person. So that is the main difference between these two cases. First one, I was having the knowledge, still I wanted to proceed with the transaction. In the second one, I'm not having the knowledge, the minor misrepresented himself and made that particular contract. So what happened in this case? Khangul versus Lakha Singh. In this case also, there are basically two parties. Lakha Singh is the minor and Khangul is the other person, the purchaser of property. So in this case, what happened is that Lakha Singh, the minor, he sold one property to this other person, right? Khangul, he sold his property to this person Khangul by misrepresenting his age. He let the other person believe that he is a minor person, he is entitled to make a valid contract and everything. So he made an agreement with this other person that I will be selling this property of mine for 17,500 rupees. So he made this particular agreement, and they all, like the other person also agreed to buy that particular property. What they decided is that at one moment, right, at that particular moment only, I will be paying 8,000 rupees, which will be like one installment for that entire value, right? 17,500. I will be paying one installment in cash. And for the other part, what they did is that they signed a promissory note. So promissory note, you must have studied, right, under Negotiable Instruments Act also. What is promissory note? Basically, it may be like, on demand I will be giving you the money, or on this particular date I will be giving you the money. Basically, it will be like a piece of paper where I will write that this so and so person bought this property from me. So, you know, like I will be paying you this amount of 9,500 rupees on demand. Whenever you demand, produce this promissory note to me, I should be paying you. So like that, they made the arrangements that this one installment I will be paying in cash. Another installment, he signed the promissory note that it will be paid on demand. Whenever you are producing it, I will be paying it. They also registered it with the sub-registrar office, right? They registered it, made the transaction, and everything was done. But after taking that one installment, what this miner did is that he refused to hand over possession of this property. So he took one installment of the money. For the other installment, he took that promissory note, and later on he refused to hand over this particular plot of land, saying that I'm a miner, so I'm not bound to you know, like perform my part of contract basically. So I'm a miner, so I'm not entitled to perform this part of contract. So I'm not giving you this plot of land. I'm not handing over possession of this plot of land to you. So in this case also same thing happened, that this plaintiff Khangul, he said that you either return this amount that you have taken, right? Property value that you have taken, you either return that amount to me, or you give possession of this particular property to me, right? You either perform the contract, or you know, like restore the benefits that you have taken basically. So in this particular case, what happened, the main difference between Mohri Bibi and this case is that the miner himself went forward and misrepresented himself. It's not like Khangul himself, knowing that the other person is minor, he entered into the contract or something like that, right? So in this case, miner himself is misrepresenting to be a major person, entering into the contract, and later on refusing to perform his part after taking the benefit, right? One installment of the money. So in this case, what happened is that this person is a minor, right? So we cannot ask for specific performance of contract. Why? Because specific performance of contract will be performed only when this contract is valid. If one party is minor, that means this contract itself is not a valid contract. So how can we ask for specific performance of the contract? But what we can do is that we can ask for return of that particular, right, restoration of the benefits that the minor has taken. So this, after that Mohri Bibi case, right, many courts were following that particular judgment. But now if we are following that particular judgment like universally, right, in every case, if it's minor, we will not ask for specific performance also, we will not ask for restoration of benefits also. So sometimes what happens is that the principles of like justice and equity will not be applied, right? Because the minor himself is going forward, misrepresenting his age, taking benefits, and then later on he is only refusing to perform his part of contract. So in all such cases, if court is also, you know, like saying that the minor is not liable, then what happens? We cannot provide justice or equity to those other people, right, who are being victims of those cases. So what happened is that this law commission report was also there on specific relief act. They also said that why we have this specific relief act, to provide some sort of, you know, like principles of equity, wherein all we can provide relief to the other person also, wherein all we can with the help of law we can, you know, like reduce the loss that the other person is suffering. So this restoration of benefit is also like very important thing that we should be considering, and it should be left at the discretion of the court. It's not like, you know, like we cannot have one single provision that, okay, fine, this is what restoration of benefit is. only when we have a valid contract, we can ask for it. If we do not have a valid contract, there is no question of restoration of benefit. That should not be the case. It should be left at the discretion of court so that court can see the situation and accordingly court can decide, just to ensure that they can provide justice and equity to all the two, like both the two parties, right? So basically what happened in this case is that because the minor himself misrepresented his age, we cannot ask him to perform his part, right? We cannot ask for specific performance of contract, but he was directed to return that benefit that he had taken. He was asked to return this amount of money that he had taken to the other person because he himself misrepresented and went forward. So in this case, it was said that it cannot be like minor is coming forward doing a fraud and then we are allowing the minor to take benefit of that particular transaction also. We cannot do that because it will go against the principles of equity. So in that case, we can ask for restoration of benefits also. So in Specific Relief Act, you would get section 33 that talks about restoration of benefits. So whatever, like provisions are there under Specific Relief Act, right? The specific reliefs that are being provided, all of those are at the discretion of court. It's not like universally, this is only what should be applied. Whatever specific reliefs you would get, all of that are at the discretion of court. That means court will see the situation and then accordingly decide whether they would ask for restoration of benefit, whether they would ask for specific performance of contract, or what other types of relief they can be, like they can provide to the other person. So same applies for this also, restoration of benefit also. So now it's like a settled thing, okay, for minor, right? If there is a contract with a minor that takes place, we do not have one single provision that will be applicable, but the person can file a case under section 33 under Specific Relief Act for restoration of benefits. Court will see the case accordingly and they will decide whether in that case restoration of benefits should be like allowed or it should not be allowed. So like that, accordingly it can be decided. So for specific relief, if you see, right, majority of the cases are filed under this only. Section 33 and also the provisions relating to injunction, right? For injunction, majority of the cases are filed, and also for this. Why? Because one party is taking benefit from it and later on they are saying that I'm not bound to perform my part of contract, or that this contract is voidable, I don't want to proceed with this particular contract. So if contract is voidable, I should not be taking benefits out of that particular contract, and later on I should not be refusing, right? If I'm refusing, I should restore the benefits that I have taken out of that particular contract. So these are the two cases that you can remember with regard to minority, that the person should be a major person. So first is Mohri Bibi versus Dharmodas Ghosh, where minor was, like the other party also knew that I'm transacting with a minor, even then they proceeded with it. So court did not allow because you were having knowledge, even then you were proceeding with this particular contract. But in the other case, minor himself misrepresented his age. So what court said is that we cannot allow this, that minor is misrepresenting his age, he is playing fraud on the other person. Later on, he only is getting benefited out of that contract. So he should be asked to return or restore the benefits that he has taken out of this contract. So main difference is the other person having knowledge that I am transacting with a minor and not having knowledge that this other party is a minor and I'm dealing with a minor. So that is basically the difference between these two cases that you can remember. So Specific Relief Act, I think no state is having it for mains, right? It's only for prelims, I guess, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so their cases and all are not important. So you can just remember the types of reliefs that are being provided. So is this part clear, the cases?
Yes, ma'am.
So for minor now, contract is what? Contract is void of initio, right? It is void from the very beginning itself. But if minor is, like doing something, he is misrepresenting, he is playing fraud or something, and then taking benefits out of it, he should not be enjoying the benefits also. The other party can file a case under specific relief, and if court feels it to be, to be proper, court might ask the minor to restore their benefits also. But court will not ask for specific performance because obviously the contract itself was not a valid one. So then we studied about consent also. So 2 or more persons will be said to have given consent only when they are agreeing to the same thing in the same sense. So we discussed this part. Now there are some cases, okay, with regard to mistake and all. There are some cases. So for this particular part, cases we will be discussing in next class, okay. So like in one class, 3-4 cases we will try to cover for the topics that we discuss. So for this part, right, what all things will make the consent to be not like a free consent? For this part also, we will see some of the cases for basically the mistake part. Like 2 cases are there that we will discuss. Also, we saw that consideration and object should be lawful. When it will be lawful? Only when it is not coming under any of these 4 grounds, right? Then it would be considered as lawful and it will make the contract also valid. So this was like the main part for essential elements. So in next class, we will be discussing some of the cases for mistake and other things, right? Regarding free consent and also for lawful consideration and object, if we get some cases, that also we will discuss. Then this basic elements part will be completed. So at that point of time, I will share this document with you. Okay. So first part I have shared, the introduction part and the definition part that I have shared. In next class, we will complete the cases regarding 4th and 5th point. Then I will share this document also. So first part, what we completed, what is contract? How is it different from agreement? And also the various definitions that are being given under the Indian Contract Act, and also the main table, right? That these are the different chapters that we are having, and these are the provisions that each of these chapters talk about. So that part we have completed. Now this is the second portion. Now third portion is what that? So now what happens? We know that these are the like 5 main essential elements which we need, right? We should be fulfilling those 5 essential elements for it to become a valid, like a valid contract, right? But even after fulfilling all those conditions, all those grounds, there are certain agreements which are specifically declared to be void, right? So under Indian Contract Act, it declares certain agreements to be. So if any contract is coming under any of these grounds, it does not matter whether it is fulfilling all those conditions, all those grounds or not, essential elements, it will still be considered as void. Why? Because it is not full, like it is coming under any of these grounds. So what are these grounds that we are having? Basically the types of agreements which are considered as specifically void. So first one is agreement having unlawful consideration or object. So this part we have already discussed, right? That agreement having unlawful consideration or object. There is some kind of an agreement between 2 persons. What consideration I am getting, that is not lawful, or for what purpose we have entered into the agreement, that purpose itself is not lawful, right? Object or consideration is not lawful. Now, in what all cases we would say that consideration or object is not lawful? For that also we have certain conditions. If it is forbidden by law, law is prohibiting something, even then we are going forward with it. In that case, what happens is that that particular contract will not be valid. Why? Because law is prohibiting that particular thing. If we are going forward with that particular contract, it will be like violating that particular provision or that particular legislation. So in that case also we can say that this consideration that I am getting or the object or purpose of this particular contract is not valid. So this contract will be what? It will be specifically void. That means we will not see for other conditions, whether parties were measured, whether free consent or other things. It will be considered as void. Then if it was of such nature that if permitted, it would defeat the provisions of any law. If law is saying that this particular type of crime is, like something where parties cannot compromise, even then they are doing it. In that case, if that particular contract is permitted by court, permitted to be performed, it will violate the provisions of law, right? It will go against the provisions of law. In that case also, we would say that this consideration or object was unlawful. If it is something that is fraudulent, right? I'm making a contract with another person to play fraud against someone else. In that case also, it would be considered that this particular like consideration or object is unlawful. Take for example, there is like one person, okay? There is one person A, and he is a dealer. He is dealing with oil, okay? He is dealing with different varieties of oil. Different varieties of oil. Now he claims that the oil that he is providing, that is of a certain quality. They are like very good and all of that. Later on, people come to know that that particular oil is what? That is not of a good quality. He is just mixing some other chemicals and everything. That is not a good quality oil. In that case, what happens? This dealer, no one else is willing to buy oil from this dealer, okay? So people come to know that this oil that he is supplying is of inferior quality. Now, at that point of time, no one is willing to buy from this particular dealer. Now, what I'm doing is that I know this situation happened, this situation took place, no one is interested to buy oil from him. What I'm doing is, take for example, I'm also having like a shop. Okay, I'm having different items. What I'm doing is that I agreed or I made a contract with this particular person that, okay, fine, you supply your oils to me. I will sell those oil in name of some other like brand or some other person or company. In that case, what we are doing is that the agreement between both of us, right? It is what? To play fraud against another person, right? I also know that what he is selling, no one is interested to buy. Even then, I'm trying to sell it by labeling it with some other brand's name, right? So in that case, the main object of our contract is what? To play fraud against all those customers who would be coming and buying oil from me. So in that case, we can say that it is what? This particular contract was entered into to play fraud against a certain person. So its object itself is not lawful. In that case also, the contract will not be valid. So there I cannot say that there is proper agreement, proper consent, proper everything is there. I cannot say that. Why? Because this main object or purpose of this particular contract itself is not valid. We want to play fraud against a certain group of person and cause loss to those group of person. So in that case also, we can say that this consideration or object is not lawful and the contract is also not a valid contract. It may be something that the court regards as immoral. So it might be a contract between two persons that the court regards as immoral. Take for example, there is a certain case against a person who used some sort of forged documents, okay, fake documents, fake degree certificate he used to get a certain job or to get admitted in a certain university. Now I am having that particular knowledge. When this case was filed, what I am doing is that I am helping this person to like tamper with all the evidences that were there against him. Or maybe I am having some knowledge with regard to his things, but I'm not disclosing those. I'm just giving like a false statement in the court or something like that. That is what? That is something that court regards as immoral, right? Now take for example, there is A is a person against whom there is a case that he was using some sort of forged document, right? He was using fake documents as genuine to get admission or to get a certain job. After that, what happened is that fake documents he was using. After that, a case was filed. A case was filed against him. a case was filed against him. At that moment, he also was knowing that I have the knowledge about all the fake documents and everything. I have some evidences. He wanted to make a contract with me saying that I will pay you 50,000 rupees. Don't give those evidences in court. In that case, what I can do, if I take that amount, next day I go to court and give all the evidences also, he cannot file a case against me saying that you know, like return that amount to me, or you should specifically perform your contract or something like that. Why? Because this contract itself is something which is declared as specifically void. There cannot be a contract like this where one person is offering money to tamper with some evidences that are available against the person. So in that case, what we can say is that this is something which is, you know, like it is something which the court regards as immoral. That is something which we should not be doing. And it might be something which is opposed to public policy. So it is not something which, you know, like usually people do, or usually it should not be something that is, you know, like allowed in, like allowed by the general public, right? It should not be something that is opposed to public policy. In case it is the object or the consideration, then in that case also we can say that this particular contract, right, it is specifically void. Even though other conditions are there, it will still not be considered as a valid contract. So that was the first thing that we have, right? So firstly, it should be that the consideration or object is unlawful. If consideration or object is unlawful, it will be considered that this is specifically void. Second is agreement without consideration. So what is agreement without consideration? Anyone? Agreement without consideration. This consideration part we have studied, right? Anyone?
Ma'am, where in terms of consideration, am I audible, ma'am?
Yeah, you are audible.
Ma'am, consideration means in terms of, it may be in terms of monetary and like money or anything in return. Agreement of any charity or donation to any trust or any particular institution, if I'm not wrong. I understood this.
Yeah. So consideration is what? Consideration is something that you are giving in return of that particular contract, right? So when two parties are agreeing to something, there will be some sort of a benefit that both the parties are getting, because of which they are willing to perform their part. So for it to make a valid contract, there should be consideration, right? One person normally making a promise to go out for a movie, court will say that there is no consideration. It's not a valid contract. It's just a random promise made to a friend. But for it to become a, you know, like become a contract, what we need consideration. So if consideration is not there, then what happens? Those agreements will become void. Why? Because agreement without consideration cannot be a contract, right? So for it to become a valid thing, we would need consideration between the two parties who are making the promise. So if there is no consideration, second thing is that it will become like a void thing, right? We cannot enforce it in the court of law. So consideration is very important. But now there are three, again, exceptions are there that we have already discussed. That one, like a mother might make a promise that I will be gifting all my properties to you. In that case, there is no consideration for the mother. Why? Because mother is not getting any money or any other benefits from the daughter, right? Even then mother is doing. In that case, it will be valid, but it should be in a proper written form, and it should be signed and everything, then it will be valid. Just casually having a conversation and saying that, okay, I will transfer all my property to your name one day, that will not make the person bound. But it should be in a proper written form that the person has agreed, then it will be binding on the person. It may be some sort of voluntary service that I am providing. I'm anyways agreeing to provide that service voluntarily, right? I'm not expecting any money for that. But in that case, what happens? There is no consideration, right? The other person is getting the benefits, but for me, there is no consideration. I'm not getting money or any other benefits. even then if this person is saying that I will be providing you some sort of a compensation for it, then the person becomes bound. But otherwise, agreements without consideration will be void, will be void. But in such cases, it may be valid that consideration is not there, but even then a person is going forward and doing it. Time bar death, same thing applies what we discussed. So for any particular agreement, right, any particular promise, to make it a contract and make it enforceable under law, we need consideration, right? There should be a valid consideration that law would recognize, and also that should be a lawful consideration. It's not like giving money in return of killing a person, causing loss to a person or something like that. It should be lawful as well. So first type of agreements which are specifically declared as void are those where consideration or object is unlawful. Second type is any sort of agreement or promise where consideration itself is not there, but there are three exceptions: natural love and affection, voluntary service, and time barred debt. Third thing is agreements in restraint of marriage. So what is this point? Anyone wants to explain? Agreements in restraint of marriage, where it will be considered not valid. So agreement in restraint of marriage is also what? Something which is considered as specifically void. But there is one exception, that there can be some sort of an agreement with regard to marriage of minor. Now, in general, what happens is that like age is fixed, right, for marriage, that 18 years and 21 years. Anyone can marry anyone, whomever they like, that age only is provided. Now, in that case, what happens? Because under law, people are free to marry anyone. There cannot be a contract that would restrict the person from marrying, or marrying someone, marrying at a certain age or anything like that. So agreement in restraint of marriage means it might be any condition with regard to marriage. It may be that you should marry this person only and not the other one. You should marry at this particular age only and not before that. You should marry in this particular manner, not in some other manner, or it may be anything. So any sort of agreement that is restricting a person, some sort of restriction it is putting with regard to marriage, those types of agreements will also be considered as specifically void. Even though all the other conditions are fulfilled or something like that, it will be specifically void. Now, take for example, but minority is like exception, right? Take for example, there is one contract. Okay, take for example, there is one person A who is of the age of 13 years. 13 years. Now what happens? There is one contract between two persons. Okay, there is a contract between A and C, maybe like A's father and another person, their relative. So there is a contract between B and C where C says that if A marries after attaining the age of 21 years, I will be gifting him this particular property, or I will be gifting him this particular thing. In that case, we cannot see that it is agreement in restraint of marriage. Why? Because anyways 21 years and 18 years is the time limit fixed under law, right? So agreement in restraint of marriage of a minor is valid, but other than that, any sort of restrictions that someone is putting in restraint of marriage will not be considered as a valid contract. Now there might be certain like some laws or other things, if it is there, right, those laws would be applicable. For example, like for Muslim law, some iddat period is there, right? During that time you cannot remarry or something like that, until and unless divorce is completely like done or something, and during separation and all you cannot remarry. So if there are certain conditions under law, those might be there, but other than that, you yourself cannot impose a restriction on a certain person with regard to marriage. Take for example, there is like one agreement between A and B. Okay, there is one agreement between A and B, both have, you know, like registered and everything, written properly and everything. They have made an agreement that we will be getting married to each other only, and we will not marry anyone else. They both were, take for example, major persons only, they both were of the age of 23 years. They made an agreement that we will be getting married to each other only, and all the other, you know, like essential elements of contract were also there. Will this contract be valid in this case if all the other conditions are fulfilled, like the basic elements for contract? Will it be a valid contract?
Yes, ma'am.
So like can the other person file a case that, you know, like you made this particular promise, now you are breaking it?
No, ma'am, it is void.
It is void. Why? Because it is specifically saying, right, it is specifically void. Even though other conditions are there, that you are above the age of majority, you are above 18 years of age, you are giving free consent, the, you know, like all the other conditions are fulfilled, even then it will be considered as void. Why? Because it is putting a restriction with regard to marriage. So there cannot be an agreement that I will marry this person only, and then, you know, like later on the other person cannot file a case. Why? Because agreement in restraint of marriage will be specifically void. Similarly, there cannot be an agreement that, you know, like you cannot marry before attaining the age of 12, you know, like 30 years of age. So the other person is free to marry at any time after attaining the age, right? 18 years and 21 years. So there cannot be any such agreements in between the persons. If there is something established under law, that part is different, that will be applicable, whatever is there, right, during separation period, during that period, and all of that, those parts would be applied. But otherwise there cannot be any restriction that parties themselves are putting with regard to like marriage of the person. So there should not be any restrictions put under a contract, and that, you know, like we cannot ask to enforce those types of contracts. So agreement in restraint of marriage will be specifically void. Only exception is with regard to minor, it is allowed. So two parties can make a contract that if you marry after attaining the age of 18 years, I will do this particular thing for you, or something like that. Okay, next point is agreement in restraint of trade. So what is this point? Agreements in restraint of trade.
Ma'am, it is something like, it is for, but like it can be said that when there are two parties, so one party is, totally restricting the liability of the other party, like in present or in future they can't do another trade, like other than the trade or the business or the profession which they are carrying for the person A. For example, if Patanjali is there, so that shopkeeper, they are like, not, I should not give the example of Patanjali, but there was a case law where it says that you are only are allowed to sell my products and you can't sell anything apart from that product. But that product was not in that much of sale, so he wanted to sell other. So when he started selling others, so it will be like, no, you can't do that, it was a restraint. So here is it's also the same, that agreement in restraint of trade, that when there is agreement between two parties, so the one party is very dominant towards the other, saying that you are very restrictive to do work assigned by me only.
Yeah.
For that period of time.
Yeah, right. So that is with, like putting certain restrictions with regard to trade, right? So see, there can be certain restrictions that are put by government. Okay, so if government is putting certain restrictions that, like you cannot do this particular, you cannot start this particular business without taking permission from government, without getting a clearance certificate, without getting NOC from this department or something like that. Those things would be allowed. But otherwise, people cannot put their own conditions or things like that, putting restrictions with regard to trade. So this is even applicable, like similar to the provision under Constitution, right? Which is that freedom that talks about like freedom to enter into any trade, profession, business. Which section is it? Article
1G.
19.
Yeah, Article 19(1)(g), right? So same thing only. Under Article 19(1)(g), if I am being given this right to enter into any sort of trade, then what happens? Some other person cannot make a contract with me, putting certain restrictions on that right? But if there is one legislation which is talking about certain guidelines that I need to follow or something, that would be valid. But parties cannot put certain restrictions. Take for example, if like if there is, I am being given this freedom to enter into any trade profession. I want to start some business with, like I want to produce some sort of chemicals or some sort of drugs. In that case, under all the environmental laws, I should be taking NOC from the local bodies. I should be getting clearance certificate from certain departments and all of that. If I'm not fulfilling those things or something like that, I cannot file a case against, like a National Green Tribunal or some local bodies that are there, right? Why? Because those are there already, right? Under some sort of law, they are already there. But there cannot be an agreement between you and me, right? Take for example, you are a shopkeeper, I am a shopkeeper, you are dealing with certain products. You cannot tell me that, okay, fine, you only deal with this particular product. Because why? People are not buying this that much, so you will gain profit and I will be, like under loss. We cannot make such kind of an agreement, right? So that is what, that is agreement in restraint of trade, where both the parties are themselves creating some sort of restrictions. It's not like those restrictions are there under some sort of legislation or some sort of laws, but parties themselves are creating those, like those restrictions. So it should not be like, like if Bar Council of India is asking you to get a license to start practicing, you cannot file a case against Bar Council of India saying that they are putting restrictions in my profession. Why? Because that is there already, right? Under some sort of a law, it's a legal body that is already there. They can put restrictions. But what this provision is mainly is with regard to normal individuals, right? Normal parties to a contract. There should not be any sort of restrictions that parties to the contract themselves are putting. So this is what it is mainly about. So there is one case also, like Mehboob Chandir versus Rajkumar Das, 1874. So this case I will like give the write up again when I'm sharing these documents. So what happened in this particular case basically is that there were like two rival shopkeepers, okay, in like one same locality. There were two rival shopkeepers. Both of them were having same type of shop, same type of goods they were dealing with. So what like one of them did is that they made an agreement between them. So they made an agreement between them. One of the shopkeepers said that what you need to do is that you need to close your shop. You can shift it to some other locality. So you can open this anywhere you want, but not in this particular locality. And what I will do is that in return of that, I will give you a certain amount of money. So based on that particular contract, based on that particular promise, this other shopkeeper, he also closed his shop and he shifted it to somewhere. Later on, when he wanted to claim for the amount, right, that you promised this amount, you pay me the amount because now I have shifted. He refused. He said that I'm not going to pay you. So this person, right, other shopkeeper, he already closed his shop and everything. So he filed the case that you should be paying me the money. So what court said is that this contract itself is not valid. It is specifically declared as void. Why? Because there cannot be a contract that is putting restrictions with regard to trade. So even if you have given your consent with regard to such kind of a contract, you have performed your part, even then you cannot ask the other party to perform his part. Why? Because the contract itself was specifically declared as void. Contract itself is not valid. So court also will not ask for, like specific performance of contract, or would not provide you any other type of relief also. So same goes for other types of agreements also, in restraint to marriage and all also, if there is an agreement. Take for example, two persons makes an agreement, okay, like one person, he wanted to move abroad. But what happened is that this other person here, like said that you stay here only, we will get married, we will stay in this particular country only. later on, if she refuses to get married, he cannot say that because of, like based on your contract or based on your promise only, I did not move to this other country, so now you should get married to me. Why? Because there cannot be an agreement in restraint of marriage. He cannot say that, like you made this particular promise. That person, like legally it would not be considered as a contract. Why? Because of this particular provision. That agreement in restraint of marriage will be specifically void. Same goes for agreement in restraint of trade. But what you should remember is it is basically talking about the restrictions put by normal, like parties to the contract. Those restrictions will not be what we have under some sort of a legal department or a government body, some sort of a legislation or anything. Those should be normal conditions, normal clauses that we are putting, right? Normal parties to the contract are putting. Those will be considered under here. Next is agreement in restraint of legal proceeding. What is this point?
Ma'am, it will be somewhat void in nature because here, the other parties are like not allowed to have, the valid access of their legal rights. Like they will be said, for example, that, within this particular time, or this is the time limit. After
Yeah.
that, your contract is not valid. You cannot enforce your legal rights and all. So basically, it will be a void kind of agreement.
Yeah, it will be void agreement. Yes. Now see, take for example. So what happens is that there can be certain, like restrictions put by the parties. Take for example, what they can do is that while making the contract itself, they might be doing, or later on also they can do. Take for example, like I am guilty of some sort of, like using fake documents. Now I know that a case is being filed against me, like, or will be filed against me, or the department will take some sort of actions against me. What I am doing is that to save myself, I made an agreement with the other person. I made a contract with the other person, maybe head of that particular department, that this is the agreement between both of us. Even though you know that I'm using fake documents, you should not go to the court and file a case against me, or you should not file a complaint to the department saying that I'm using fake documents. So in that case, what happens, that particular contract will be what? It will be void. No matter whether other conditions are there, fulfilled, not fulfilled or anything, it will be void. Why? Because I'm restricting this person's right to file a complaint against me to the department, take some sort of departmental, like investigation or things like that. That will be what? Specifically declared as void. Take for example, I'm saying, okay, I'm making an, like a contract with another person. I'm providing some sort of a service. I am like writing contracts. Okay, I'm drafting contracts for that particular company. Now, while hiring me, the company cannot, like provide a clause there that, okay, fine, in any like in case of any sort of dispute between both of us, you should not approach the court. You don't have any rights to go to the court. Those kind of provisions should not be there. Now, take for example, when you see all these different types of contracts that, like the companies enter into in day-to-day basis, what they will mention is that in their contract itself, they will mention the jurisdiction, that in case any sort of, like dispute arises between us, where we will be going, like like Karnataka would be the jurisdiction where we will be going, or this would be the jurisdiction. So like that, they will also fix the jurisdiction. Because take for example, a company is based in Bangalore. Now they are dealing with multiple clients. Someone is from Punjab, someone is from like Mumbai, someone is from some other states. Now it's not possible for them to go to each and every place and then represent themselves. So sometimes they also restrict it in their thing only. So that thing would be valid, but otherwise they cannot put a restriction like, in case there is a dispute also, you should not go to the court. You don't have the right to file a case. Or they cannot put that, like in case there is a dispute, you just have 10 days. Now we are already having the Limitation Act, right? So whatever time frame Limitation Act provides, that only would be applicable. Parties cannot say that you just have 5 days or 10 days to file a case. because that is a very less time that is being provided, right? So there should not be any sort of agreement in restraint of legal proceeding. It may be just making an agreement with a person saying that I'm paying you 50,000 rupees. You should not give this evidence in the court of law. You should not appear in the court as a witness. You should not file a case against me or something like that. The person may take the money and next moment only he can go and file a case. The other person cannot ask him to return the money. Why? Because this contract itself was what? Contract itself was void, right? So the parties cannot ask for specific performance, restoration of benefit, or any other sort of reliefs in those cases. So this also, whenever I'm saying, right, any sort of restrictions, right, restraint of marriage, restraint of trade, restraint of legal proceedings. So this restraint is put by parties to the contract only. Okay, the parties who are there, they are putting those restrictions. Now under law also there are so many restrictions, right? Under Limitation Act, they would fix a time limit. Only under this time limit you can go to the court, ask for your, like relief. Or if not, you can maybe give your reasons or something like that. Court's discretion, it depends whether they would allow or not. So under law there might be some, like time frame mentioned, some restrictions put. All of those things are legal, but when parties themselves are creating, that part becomes void. So if under Limitation Act there are certain restrictions, those would be allowed. Take for example, under certain laws, right, specific relief also, there is one provision where it says that like for this particular situation only you can file like a regular case. There is no question of appeal, revision, review, or anything like that. So in that case, this restriction is put by court only, like that particular legislation only. So that would be valid. Under Right to Information Act also, if you see, there are certain time limits. You can file a, like you can ask for information under RTI. If not, you can file a first appeal. If not, you can file a second appeal. But there is a time limit within which you should be filing. So those restrictions would be allowed. Because why? Those are put under a legislation, under some sort of a department that is established by law. Those would be allowed. But parties, right, being normal parties to a contract, we cannot be creating our own restrictions, and we cannot be imposing those restrictions to the other parties. So if any restriction is there under some sort of a valid legal thing, that will be allowed. But being normal parties to a contract, we cannot be creating our own restrictions and imposing it to the other person. So this is with regard to agreement in restraint of legal proceedings, where the persons themselves, right, the parties themselves are creating these restrictions and they are sort of trying to impose it on the other person. Next is agreement. Okay, next is agreement. Next point is agreement which is not certain or capable of being made certain. Now, what is this? I'm making a contract, or I'm making an, like there is one agreement between us, but whatever things are being mentioned, that is not, like that is not clear, that is not certain, right? It's not very much clear or certain. In that case also, it would be considered as specifically void. Take for example, I'm making a contract with a person that I want to buy oil. So in that case, what I'm saying is that I want to buy, like oil, maybe 100 liters of oil. But you are having different varieties of oil. Maybe you are having coconut oil, mustard oil, gingerly oil, this oil, that oil. You are having like 10 different varieties of oil. In that also, you have different types of oils, okay, in the same oil, right? Take for example, coconut oil. You have like wood pressed oil, cold pressed oil, normal coconut oil. You have 5 different varieties. So in that case, if I just, like if just there is an agreement where I'm saying that I want to, like buy coconut oil of 100 liters, that is not certain for you to understand what variety of coconut oil I need, right? So in that case also, it would be considered that this is specifically void. Why? Because this agreement itself is not very clear for you to perform it, right? You are not certain what variety of oil you should be supplying to me, because that is not clear from it. So there can be multiple examples of this where like I'm telling something, but it is not very clear from my things, like what I want to buy, or what variety, what quality of things I want to buy. So this is with regard to contracts where it is, like it's not certain, or it is not capable of being made certain. Next is agreements by way of wager.
Ma'am, wager can be like, talking about something in future perspective, and it is more of a kind of, yes, the bet and all can also be an example. And like we say, like, if like the event which is futuristic events, and the guarantee of happening is also not attached to it, these kind of agreement can be known as wager agreement. And one of the example can be horse racing also. Like, they bet on a horse on basis, and but it is not certain that the same horse will win or not. So certain kind of agreement will be a wagering agreement.
Yeah, wagering agreement. But then again, there are certain things, right? Take for example, during festivals and all, people would sell that lottery tickets, right? 10 rupees, 5 rupees they would sell, and then there would be some prizes that would be there. So what about those things?
Ma'am, if I'm not wrong, the lottery thing, I think it doesn't come under here, because I think it is dealt with Lottery Act something. So
Yeah.
that's
So
why
so in case of wagering agreement, it's more like a bet, like saying that, okay, fine, if India wins today, I will give you 10,000 rupees. If Australia wins, you give me 10,000 rupees. Those sort of things would come under here. So where it's like we don't know whether it will happen or not, right? So it is like it might happen, this might also happen. But in that case also, we are betting on that particular thing. If India wins, I will give you this amount. If not, you give me this particular amount. So those things would come under here where it is not allowed, where it is said that this particular, like agreement or the contract that is there between parties, that itself is void. Why? Because this agreement or contract was for wagering agreement. So there was one like case also, I guess, where one person, right, uh, he took money from a bank. So while giving loan, banks would ask, right, for what purpose you need money, if for business, what sort of business, and all the details. So bank gave loan, and the person wanted to open some sort of like this kind of business only. So in that case, the person failed to return the money or something like that, then bank was not allowed to ask for that. Why? Because bank was knowing for what sort of business he wanted the money, but still, like provided that money. So because it was void, bank was not allowed. But in case of lottery and all, what happens if the local laws of that particular state is allowing for it, then in that case it can be done. So you would see during like this Durga Puja and all, in the places where it is popular, you would see there would be like in every single locality, they would have all these lottery things going on, that 10 rupees, 20 rupees, 50 rupees tickets would be there. And then they would, like display the prices also, this car, that bike, this TV, this fridge, and all of that would be there. So this sort of things would be allowed where the local law is allowing for it, then in that case it would be allowed. Otherwise, if this kind of agreements are there, that would be considered as void. So you would even see like some small this kind of lottery things also would be there. Like in our place, what happens, there is like one festival called like Bihu. So what people would do, it's like a feast, okay? People would cook a lot of things, and also there would be lottery for, like small lottery. You buy tickets for 2-3 rupees also for some chicken, this many chickens you would get, this many things you would get. So those things are what? Those things are allowed under that particular state, right? So those would not come under here. But if people are betting on certain things like India wins, this happens, that happens, those things would come under this provision where it would be considered as void, that this parties cannot, like ask for performance of the contract or things like that. Agreement to do impossible act, what will be this?
Ma'am, it could be anything like any contract which is like impossible in nature, or it can also be unlawful in nature. Like we don't even know that whether it will take place or not, or we just know it that it will never gonna happen, and it will be like if it will happen, it will be in unlawful way. So anyways, this kind of contract will be void in nature.
So agreement to do impossible act.
Yes, ma'am.
So in case of this, right, what is impossible to perform? That whatever I have promised, right, that itself is something which I cannot even perform. Take for example, I just told you that, okay, I will go with you, and with the power of my magic, I will find some sort of like hidden treasures or something like that. So in that case, first of all, magic itself is not there. Second of all, there is no hidden treasure to find from some place. In that case, what happens, it's not possible for both of us to perform that particular contract. So even though there is some sort of a contract, you cannot later on file a case against me that I promised, like I made some kind of a promise like this, because this is not possible for me to perform at the first place. Now there might be certain things where what happens, take for example, I made a normal promise, okay, which was possible for me to be performed. Like I made a promise that, take for example, I make like drawings, okay, with my right hand, I make some like beautiful drawings. I made some sort of a contract with you that I will be making like these like 10 different paintings for you. Now after that, what happened, because of some accident or something, like went wrong with my, like this fingers or something like that. At that moment, I was not able to make paintings. So this moment, what happens, the contract was normally, what the contract was valid only, right? But now it has turned to something which is impossible to perform. Now at this moment, it's not possible for me to make those paintings and give it to you. At that point also, what happens, it would come under this, that at this point it has become something which is impossible to be performed for me. So in that case also, we can say that it will be void, because I cannot perform that particular promise anymore. So even though initially it was valid, later on also it may turn to something which is not like possible to be performed. So those sort of things would come under this particular part. So these are certain things where we would not consider, like whether other provisions, other parts, other elements are there or not. Just because it is coming under any of these grounds, it would be considered that it is specifically void. Even though parties were measured, consent was proper and all of that, even then we would say that this, like this particular contract will not be enforceable. So parties cannot file a case saying that this contract should be specifically performed because they promised for it, or that, like they should be restoring the benefits or any other relief that basically is available to the parties. They cannot be saying for it because the promise itself is considered as void. So for this also, if I find some cases, we can discuss that. Like one case that we discussed with regard to restraint of trade, that part, if I get that case, that we can discuss. And for other things also, if we get some cases, that we can discuss. So basically you can remember the points, okay? For this also, there might be a question asking that under which of these situations a contract will be specifically void. Might be conditions would be there. So you should be knowing these conditions, that there are these 7 conditions which are there that will make a contract specifically void. So try to remember the basic things, okay? Like it's not that important to be knowing, like cases or examples or illustrations for all of that. but knowing the things would be enough for you. Like for objective type, they would hardly ask you under which all situations the contract will be specifically void. So if you know these 7 conditions, it would be easier for you to, you know, like choose the correct answer. Also, I have some like MCQs for this part that also we can discuss, because we have completed the elements part, right? Essential elements also, and also what all contracts will be specifically void. So for this part, whatever MCQs and all I get, that part we can discuss in next class. Also, if I get some cases for this, we will discuss that. And then with regard to mistake, we will discuss, okay? Mistake making consent, not a free consent, right? That provision, with regard to that, we will study some cases and all. So other than that, this part, is it clear? Because this is like the basic part, right? What is contract, what is agreement, difference between that, what are the essentials that we need for valid contract, and what are the other things that we need to make the contract valid, right? If contract is falling under any of these 7 grounds, it would be considered as a void contract. So this is the basic part that we have. Then we have certain, you know, like consequences for breach of contract, when a party is you know, like having a right not to perform his part of contract, and all that part is there, that we will continue. So is this part clear? Under this, any other things you want to be discussed or something like that? Is this part clear to all?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so next class we will see some cases, and also then for like consequences for breach of contract and all, we will discuss. Okay, now see, take for example, there is like one provision. Okay, now take this example only. Like what will make a contract specifically void? Okay, now for your exams, right, like in prelims, what all questions might be coming basically on these points only, right? So it's enough for you to be knowing the main points, and also maybe the sections, which section is talking about agreement in restraint of legal proceeding. There might be a question like this also. So is this part enough? Like how I'm you know, like completing this part, is that enough, or you want to, you know, like study the section also, like what is section 23, what is section 24, like that you want to discuss, or this way? Which way do you prefer?
Ma'am, if it will be great if we get a brief about the essentials or the elements of the every sections, like not specifically all, but the main one. Like we can skip which are the small ones, or which are general in nature, which have the elements which are general in nature. But sometimes there are so many sections which have uh, a lot more of sub clauses and clauses, and which contains different kinds of elements, and they are useful for any they can make a huge difference. Their small elements can make a huge difference in any given situation. So it will be great if you give a just a like brief of elements of important sections, which are huge sections. That will be fine now.
Okay, so what we will do is that like this we will discuss. So I'm also mentioning the sections, right? That is 23 and 24, that is talking about consideration and object. So accordingly, you can try to remember the sections, and wherever the section is important, right? Take for example, agreement in restraint of marriage. Now here I'm just mentioning section 26, but if you read section 26, you would come to know that, okay, fine, minority is an exception. So like that, if there are some, you know, like some important points or some other things in the section, that I will try to also tell you, but not like I will, you know, like explain the section or something like that. So whatever is important from that particular section, I will tell you that, and otherwise I will, you know, like discuss this part normally. Like for mistake, you know, like the sections are important. So for that, I will try to give you some cases and then discuss the sections also. Like 3 sections are there that we can discuss. So accordingly, we can do that.
Okay, ma'am. This will also great. Sounds great.
Yeah. So okay, fine then. So this was like the second part of Indian Contract Act. Okay. So next class I will complete with the cases and all of that, and then I will share you this particular document that will have all the essential elements and also the grounds that will make a contract specifically void. So you can go through this part till that time, and then we will proceed with the next, like third, fourth part of the Indian Contract Act accordingly. So fine, then I'm ending this class here only. For the next topic, we will continue with next class. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.